Another part of the story that I'd like to share with you about his youth is that Arnold, coming out of a prosperous family, was actually tracked. He was going to school so that he could become a learned gentleman, perhaps even a minister. He was being prepared to go to Yale College. Now, in the 18th century, to go to college, you were the rarest of the rare. It's highly unlikely. Mostly 0.00 portion of 1% of the people would go to college. Very different from today. Highly unusual. He's being tracked to go to Yale. But then he will be brought home from the schools, and rather than going to Yale, he will be apprenticed. He'll be apprenticed. Why? Because the family has lost its way financially, and he will then be apprenticed to Daniel and Joshua Lathrop, the Lathrop brothers, living in Norwich. They were cousins of his mother, Hannah, and he will be trained to be an apothecary merchant. That will be his training. And ultimately, he will be set up in business by the Lathrop brothers, not by going to Yale, but actually by moving to New Haven, where Yale is located, and he will begin to set up an apothecary shop. It will develop into a general merchandise store. Individuals can come and read and buy books there. And ultimately, Arnold will expand his own business interests as a young man in his 20s and will get involved in the West Indies trade. That is, trading with British and French and Dutch islands in the West Indies in various kinds of commerce, hauling goods out of New England into the West Indies. Sometimes he traded up into Canada. And he becomes, by a description in 1774, at this point, just a little over 30 years of age, he is described as the most credit-worthy merchant in New Haven. He's building a beautiful new home. He has succeeded financially, but something happened along the way, and that is during the 1760s and the 1770s, all of this agitation with the British begins to develop. After the French and Indian War, and what will happen is Arnold will get caught up in that agitation, and as a trading merchant, he resents the restrictions that British policymakers are putting upon American commerce. There's a duty on molasses. He doesn't want to pay it. There's a duty on various other kinds of trading goods that he's involved in, and he doesn't want to pay those duties. He doesn't like the Stamp Act of 1765, which was a general tax on all sorts of various kinds of goods. He resents the Townshend duties of 1767 on various trade goods. And he will begin to speak out. It will become a leader in the New Haven community, almost like a popular leader in trying to get people to agitate to oppose these British policies, which ultimately most of them will be removed. So what I'm trying to suggest to you is this notion of arbitrary power does carry over from his childhood. It carries into and it's translated into his perception of what's wrong with the British Empire and the position of the Americans in the British Empire in the 1760s and the 1770s.